Hey guys, this is Michael Tarala from Qlik. Recently I was working with some community members and they wanted to know how I can set up a data connection that can be shared or reused, as well as secured to certain attributes such as a department or a group. So in this video I'll show you how we can do that, and what you'll notice is the flexibility of the security rules engine and how you can apply different rules to lock down and secure different resources, in this case the data connections. So a couple things to point out. First of all, you will notice in the QMC that there is a section for data connections. This is where you manage the data connections. You do not create them here, at least not yet. You will create data connections within the hub as you create an app, and you will see that process. The other thing I want to bring up is I have a couple of users that I'm going to share those data connections with, and these users have been put in from my Active Directory. So as I synced my Active Directory to my Qlik repository, it pulled in an attribute that I set up for this video, and that attribute is group, and it has a value of Qt video group. Okay, so understanding that when you set up access to the individual users, you can utilize the attributes from Active Directory or your other user directory connector attributes to secure your different resources. So you're going to see that momentarily. The other thing I did want to point out is if I go to my Qlik server, you will see I already set up a ODBC driver to access a Microsoft Access database, as well as I have a location where there's an Excel file. So we're going to utilize these two as sources of data. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a data source, and I'm going to do that as my current user, which is the user ID MTO, which is a root admin or a content admin. Understand that most users, when you set them up initially before locking them down, have access to create apps and data connections. So it's up to you to secure those within the system. And this is an example of how to do that. So let's say I'm a content admin. I'm going to create a application for those to use, and I'm going to create some data connections in that app. So we'll just call this sales and profit report and click create. And then as part of this process, I'm going to create a new connection. So we go into the data load editor, and you'll notice that there are two connections here. These are just available to me because I'm a root admin, and they provide access to the locations where the logs files are for the governance type applications. So we can ignore those for now. So here we can create a new connection, and I'll select folder, which is only accessible to a root admin unless you specify that in a security rule. And I'm going to go to my Qlik data folder, and we're going to call this sales data files, and click save. Create one more connection, and we will go and select ODBC, and I'll select the MS Access DB that I've set up. And now we have two data connections that have been set up for us. So what I want to do next is I want to prevent the regular user or development community from creating connections. So let's move over to my other session. So I have two browsers. The Firefox browser is my root admin ID, MTO, and then this particular browser, which is Chrome, has one of my user IDs that I've set up from Active Directory. So these are the default users and the default access when you set up a user and provide the user access pass. In this case, we have Qt video user 2. So if I create a new app, and we'll just call this test 2, click create, click open. This user by default has access to the data load editor, and they have access to create connections. Pretty much every connection except the folder connection, which is only accessible by the default security rule for the root admin. Well, let's say I don't want user connections to be created by regular users. I just want that content admin or the root admin to do that. So we'll go back to the other browser, which has my root admin ID logged in. We'll go to the Qlik Management Console. I'm going to go to security rules, and then by default we have a security rule called data connection. So the data connection resource filter and the security rule pretty much allows everybody to create a data connection except the folder connection, which is only allowable by the root admin. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable this particular rule. So I'm going to disable that. And when I go back to the user, which is in the Chrome browser, and I click refresh, you'll notice that I cannot create a connection. Okay. If we go back to this browser, which is my root admin, and I also click refresh within the data load editor, you're also going to notice that this individual can only create a folder. So we got to fix that. They can only create a folder connection. So we want to fix that. So what we're going to do is go into the security rule editor, go back to security rules, and we're going to create a new security rule. And in this security rule, I'm going to put in what I call UDR, user defined rule. That's a convention that I use to basically define a rule. So now rules are additive. So what will happen is that you can append to them. So depending on how the resource filters are set up, it will add the additional security values. In this case, I disabled one, and we're going to create a brand new one. And by doing so, we're going to use the resource filter data connection, okay, which you can see within this list here, data connections _star. Where you see that is if you click this link here, it'll bring you to the security rule conventions, and then you'll see available resource filters, and then there's a list here. I'm not going to go into all of these right now, but I'm using the data connection resource right here. So we'll go back here, and we're going to say create, read, update, and delete, and we're going to say where the user's role value is content admin, and add another rule, user role value root admin, okay, and click apply. Okay, and if you're wondering where those roles are coming from, those are not coming from the Active Directory attributes that I will show you in a moment. They are coming from the user role that's been defined. So here, if we go into a particular user, you can see you could add what's called admin roles. Okay, and you can also add your own too, but I'm not going to get into that just yet within this example. Okay, so by creating that security rule for content admins and root admins, going back into my data load editor and then selecting refresh. Remember, I'm a root admin that's been logged into the Firefox browser. I can now create all those connections. Okay, once again, going into the regular user session inside my Chrome browser, just to show you nothing's changed, I can't create any connections. Okay, so there we've locked down the ability for only content admins and root admins to create connections. However, we still want this user to be able to create an app from a connection, okay, based off of that user attribute. So let me show you how to do that. So let's go back into my root admin session, back in the Qlik Management Console, and I'm going to go to the users, and just to show you, we have the Qt Sense video user. You can see that video user belongs to a group called Qt Sense video group. Same thing for the user 2. These are the attributes that are pulled in from the Active Directory. So I'm going to leverage those within my security rule. So you remember in the data connections, we set those up within the app. Okay, a content admin can do that now, and a root admin can do that. However, I can make these accessible now to my other users. So I'll select my sales data files connection, and you can see along the right we have something called system rules. And here are the default system rules. Okay, well, I can set up a new system rule. Okay, and in that system rule, we can utilize the basic capability, which is the simple editor. And we can say where the user group select, and then you can see SG Qt Sense video group. So the group from the attributes that Active Directory provided can be used to create these security rules and make this connection available to just those users in that group. So I click apply, and now that connection is now available. So if I go over to my user session and I click on refresh in my data load editor, you can now see the folder sales data file connection is available, and I can access that and select the files. Okay, now I can do that for each connection. Okay, so I can go back and then I can select this connection and do the same thing. However, let's say we just want to create a global rule for those particular connections. Okay, so if you want to go back into system rules of that connection, here's our rule we attached to that data connection. I'm going to delete that for now. Okay, and I like to kind of prove everything as I go back and forth. So I go back to my user session. You can see the connection is now gone. Go back to my admin session, and I'm going to go create a new security rule. So I'll create the new security rule, and I'm going to create it from a template. You'll notice that we have a variety of templates that control access to a variety of resources. So in this example, we'll select the data connection access rule, and we'll give it a name. So this will be called UDR data connection, and let's say we're going to lock it down for those sales data files. So I'll call it _sales. You can provide a description if you would like, and then start utilizing the basic editor. So from the first area here, you're going to see where the user group is equal to the value of QT-Sense video group. Then we're going to click the plus button to add another rule. Now in this case, you want to ungroup them. This is equivalent to performing the order of operations with parentheses, if you will. So in this case, we're going to say where this rule, in other words, the group value, and then the data connection name value, which is MS Access DB, and then or data connection name value sales data files. Okay, so what this is saying that you have access to these two data connections if you are in the QT-Sense video group for this particular data, for this particular security rule. So we click apply. That rule has been created. Now to test each one of these, I've also created another user, and this user is not part of the QT-Sense video group. So this user's been logged in. I'm using IE, Internet Explorer, for that session. So if I just refresh their session while they're in their app in the data load editor, that individual doesn't have the ability to create connections nor sees that connection. If I now go into my Chrome browser where I am logged in as that particular user, if I refresh just again, you can see those two connections are available for that particular user. In this case, that user is a QT-Sense video user. To make it a little bit more interesting, just to test it out, we'll open up that browser again, and this time we'll log in with QT-Sense video user 1, who is also part of the QT-Sense video group, and we'll go into that video user app, go into the data load editor, and you can see that user has also access to those data connections. Okay, and then finally, going back into my admin session in the data load editor, just refreshing, showing you nothing has changed. That rule respects the previous roles that we set up where the user was part of the content admin or root admin role. Okay, so that is another way that you can set up the security and sharing of the data connections. So you can really see the flexibility. Security rules are used throughout the QlikSense platform. So I plan on creating a couple more videos that go into more detail on these, but right now, hopefully this will suffice to answer the community members' questions. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the section appropriately below. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.